Hi, I'm here with Mariel Garza and Paul Thornton, two of my former LA Times opinion colleagues. I've also called them fellow survivors of LA Times opinion. Um, they are the founders of a new journalism publication platform site, Empire, perhaps, uh, that has been on Substack for a while, and just this week launched a new site at goldenstate.org. So
golden-state.org.
golden-state.org. And yeah, I'm really glad to see both of you under some arguably better circumstances than we've met in the past. How are you two doing? How's your week been?
Busy. And we're both recovering from a crazy few days and not much sleep as we got prepared for doing things that as journalists we're not used to doing, which is writing press releases and sending out basically marketing emails and fundraising and doing all of these things, and not to mention all the technical things you have to do to publish anything these days. It's been a lot. So we're just decompressing today, but we're actually it was a really strong start. We're talking mid-November, cloudy day after a holiday, and we have already, again, very strong first day of fundraising, a lot of new subscribers to both the Substack and our main site, home on the online world. And it's really good.
Yeah. I have to agree on the sleeplessness thing aspect of it, certainly. I think I've sent a few 4 a.m. emails to Mariel in the last few days, hoping to God that she doesn't actually read them at 4 a.m. And, you'll get a reply an hour later. And this is, it's exhausting. But yeah, basically what Mariel said. There's, you want to immediately have access to this giant pile of cash to build the organization that you want to do right now, but that's not just the way things work out. So we're in it for the long haul. We had a great first day, lots of encouraging emails and messages, some on Substack. So yeah. And it feels nice to share this with you, Josh, considering the last time we shared a workplace together, we were having late night calls to see if this was really as bad as we thought it was at the LA Times opinion page. So
Yeah,
it helps to be hopeful now.
yes, it does. It's nice. It's nice for a change. We were all chatting yesterday about the fact that we all got to know each other, arguably under the worst possible circumstances, because of the way the opinion department worked. We sort of, we all knew each other, but somewhat peripherally, because I was on the op-ed team handling columnists and contributors. Mariel was the editorials editor handling staff written editorials and endorsements. And Paul was the letters editor as well as a columnist. So we all had fairly separate tasks most of the time.
And we were all working remotely.
Yes, we were.
We still hadn't gone back into the office full time, which is a whole other weird story.
Yes.
Maybe for another day.
Yes.
And Josh, is remote, not in LA. And so he started a job remotely. It's just a really weird, really hard time to work together at a team when everybody is, only meeting on Zoom. So, and we didn't have, it wasn't until things got hard where we all started sort of commiserating.
Yeah.
That after I left, and it was ultimately the blocked editorial, but there was a lot of daily stress going on about trying to please the publisher and to second guess what he wanted. And Josh was tapped to fill in for me, and that lasted for like how long, Josh? Until you were like, no way, no.
Yeah, a month. Yeah,
Tell us what happened. Why could you not? I mean, I understand. I've been there, but share with the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to mention that, the first really long conversation I had with Mariel was when, shortly after you resigned in a blaze of national attention over this Kamala Harris endorsement that was killed. I was asked to uh, do the job you'd been doing. And by the way, the editorial board lost a couple of writers at the same time. So I said, well, that used to be a job I really would have liked to get, but I'm not sure I want to do that now. And I was told, well, I don't think I was told there wasn't a plan B or a plan C. I was the plan B, and there was no plan C. So I decided to give it a shot. And that was when I called you and under these miserable circumstances and had that conversation with you about what they had asked me to do and the fact that I was going to try to do it. And then shortly after that, I think I had my first really in-depth conversation with Paul because his function was within the editorial board, and he sent me a Slack message saying something to the effect of, Josh, could you give me a call soon and basically tell me what the hell is going on here?
Well, that was your infamous killed editorial about RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz.
Yeah.
So and I had been called and told that I had to fill up a print hole pretty suddenly.
That's right.
That got pulled.
Yeah.
And I was highly suspicious of what had happened. And so that's when I sent you that message just to say, is this as bad as I think it is? I was hoping you'd put my mind at ease.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't.
I didn't manage to do that.
You confirmed my sanity, though.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I tried to the best of my ability to do it for a few weeks. It was hard the whole time. There was.
Why was it hard? What were you experiencing? And tell us how that editorial was killed. I was not privy to, obviously, to that situation. What happened?
Sure. I had been working mostly with the writers, editing the writers who remained, and a lot of the topics the LA Times covered, the editorial board covered, were local and state issues. A lot of them didn't have anything to do with the incoming Trump administration at that point. But we were well aware of what had happened to your endorsement and that there was a real point of view all of a sudden coming from the ownership. And that, every single time we touched on the administration, the ownership wanted to see what we were writing, and there was sort of an evolving set of directions about what we could do and couldn't do. I sort of took the position that I only, I'd been on, I think, 5 editorial boards by that point, and I kind of knew what I was doing, at least, the way it used to be done.
And it looked that way to me like you really knew what you were doing. So you don't have to.
And so I was going to try to do it that way because I didn't see any other way to do it. And the push kind of finally came to shove. There was a lot of editing and back and forth and sort of worrying about, like our post-election editorial caused some blowback, and some of the other things we wrote about the incoming administration caused some blowback. And then
blowback from who? Blowback from the owner?
From the publisher, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you as the letters editor at the time, there was no blowback from the readership.
Yeah, no.
Post-election editorials.
To be clear.
The initial burst.
Yeah, and I shouldn't even say publisher because there wasn't a publisher per se. It was from the owner, and it all came to a head when I finally I had been saying Trump at that point was nominating a bunch of really ridiculous choices for his cabinet. And I said, well, a normal editorial board would have something to say about this. And so I'm going to write an editorial about this. And there was a lot of back and forth and I wrote it partly because I knew it was going to be difficult and I didn't want to put anyone else in the position. And it was on the brink of running after a whole lot of back and forth about how far I could go in the writing and how critical I could be. But I didn't really back down in terms of, the point that if we can't do this, what are we doing?
I mean,
And
that is the irony there. Editorial
yeah,
boards, editorial writers are paid to write strong opinions. Obviously, it's as a collective group, but it's to speak the truth at a time when it's difficult. That's why you have the group byline, so you don't get sort of the blowback. But what was happening and what had continued to happen and why, so many people have left is that we were being defanged.
yeah,
And at every turn, even if we weren't being told don't do something, we were internalizing that. And
right.
that is no, and nobody wants to read the kind of crap that you're going to come up with if it's totally worked over. It becomes that's not what
Absolutely.
anybody wants to read. And that's, I think we've seen a huge exodus from the opinion section, and it's just a shell of itself. There are
Right.
very few people left. I think there's 3 editors or 2 editors and somebody who's working on letters, as well as the excellent columnists 3 columnists who stayed, Robin and Carey and Jackie Colmus and LZ. And they're getting to write their own things, but they've also been a lot of really milquetoast and kind of mealy, kind of conservative apologists is really kind of grim. And this is why last year or earlier this year, sorry, Paul and I were just like, this is a travesty for this in gigantic area, city and region to have no strong voice, not lifting up the voices, not just an editorial board or writers, but journalists and experts and people who are living. I mean, community writers. And so this is what sort of sparked the idea for Golden State. Also, something that really motivated us was the rumor, which is now a fact, that the New York Post, the Murdoch-owned conservative New York Post, saw the void in LA and California and decided we're going to fill it with our own creepy brand of commentary and gotcha
Yeah.
journalism. We think, I mean, it's terrible. They've just hired a bunch of people. They're throwing a big party next week. These are not Californians. They hired an opinion editor from Breitbart who is, I mean, he's not a Californian. He's not even, I mean, he was born in South Africa, from what I can tell. I think I'm getting that right. And so into this void, we felt it's really, really important to have a homegrown, grassroots, nonprofit, independent voice for California. And that's, sorry, I'm getting on my rant now.
Preach. I love
This has
it.
been a
Yeah.
year in the making, and and it's so important. And we're not trying to make money. I mean, God, like nobody makes money in this. Well, some people make money, but we're not making any money. We created a nonprofit. So some rich person can't buy us out for $150 million. And I mean, that is where we're at. And I'm going to stop ranting now because I've said enough. Thank you,
I think that's
everybody.
great.
Well, yeah, I do want to say it was one of the silver linings of the LA Times opinion implosion that I did get to know both of you because you were both extremely gracious and professional. in difficult circumstances, the most difficult circumstances work-wise I've ever experienced. And it's great to see the site. It's great. I'm so happy that you're both working in journalism, and the site looks great. I've been reading you on Substack, and now I'm reading the new golden-state.org, and it looks fantastic. It's had a lot of great, substantial, locally focused, California focused opinion. And you're right, it's a huge void. I mean, it was incredible to me to, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I've been in journalism, my whole career, and I grew up reading the LA Times, and I was elated to finally get a job there and be working with journalists like you two and all our colleagues there, who were all fantastic journalists. And it was incredible to actually experience something that um, an institution that important and that powerful and valuable just kind of collapsing, at least the part of it that we were in, which I obviously, having been an opinion journalist for a long time, um, feel is a very important part of it. Um, you know, it was incredible to see it disintegrate in that way, into a lot less than what it used to be. So it does leave a huge void, and
Yeah.
I think it sort of hastened a trend that was already underway, and that is the downfall of certain legacy, particularly newspapers that couldn't be um, that couldn't be nimble. And we're seeing a lot of fragmentation in good, a lot of experimentation. Um, so many people who have left news organizations, traditional news organizations, are doing what we have done. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other LA-based journalism startups that are just about to go online. It's a kind of a exciting moment right now. And I mean, I think this is a little like the dot-com boom of the late 1990s, which I was involved in and sort of experienced firsthand. But a lot of excitement, a lot of things tried. Not everything's going to work out in the long term, but there's going to be, I think, kind of a renaissance
Yep.
in journalism. And I feel excited to be a part of that. I think nonprofit is kind of the way to go, at least for the moment. I mean, corporate control. I have worked for the Alden hedge fund, which systematically decimated so many beloved newspapers in California. I've worked for the billionaire. The billionaire, if I was going to be a good billionaire, then it was a bad billionaire. And I don't. I like the independent model.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
glad you're doing it too, Josh.
Yeah.
I'm really hopeful that, um, you know, people who are out there on their own, and putting out their shingle are going to get the support they need.
Yeah. Josh, can I just say, I think you and I had similar experiences growing up with the LA Times. I basically learned to read through that newspaper. And it was, I remember just how thick it was. You could hear the thud on your doorstep, and I couldn't get through it in a day.
yeah,
But I what Mariel said about there being a void, um, working at the LA Times since I worked there since 2005, the narrative was kind of this slow decline and stripping the place for parts. I mean, the decline has been a long process.
right.
It has been a painful, long process. I saw many rounds of layoffs. Yeah, then the billionaire doctor bought it, and we had that brief moment of, my gosh, anything can happen now. And then when one person decides to turn the screws, that all ended.
Yeah,
One person. And this is someone who I know from a meeting with him does not understand basic concepts about journalism. I mean, he has such far afield ideas about what an opinion section should look like, what an editorial board is. Um, that if you hold on to those ideas, you kind of can't do it there. So we're doing
Yes.
it here, you
Right.
know. And
Right.
I also got this lesson, and this will be the last thing I say about those dreaded 4 months at the LA Times when everything changed. I got a lesson in how censorship works. I was never given a directive
Hmm.
to to not well, actually no, I was given directives. I guess it didn't happen very much, but there were definitely expectations that were communicated in a passive aggressive way
Right.
that shamefully, I hate to say, kind of affected how I edited.
Right.
And extracting myself from that, I kind of see my work through new eyes now, and I'm proud of with a lot of what I did. But I can also look at specific moments and say, oh yeah, what went into publishing that was an interesting conversation late at night.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, to gain a firsthand experience of how that works. So now that Mariel and I, we got our own thing, never again.
Right. Yeah, I have that same never again feeling myself. It's very hard to contemplate. Like you, I wasn't at the LA Times for very long. I was there for 2 years, unlike the two of you. But I was at a lot of other opinion shops and experienced varying degrees of pressure over various things from different corporate owners, many different corporate owners over those years. And yeah, I really relate to what you said about the way censorship works, because um, I think the killing of the Kamala Harris endorsement was a dramatic event that people had to respond to, and then and you responded, I think righteously, Mariel, and admirably. Um, and then for the next approximately 6 months, or maybe a little less, Paul and I, being sort of on different functions, I went back to the op-ed side after my editorial was killed, and Paul doing letters and writing. Um, it was not as clear cut. It was a little bit more like, can we do this? Can we do that? And it was very passive aggressive and drip, drip, drip. And it,
Everything took a long, long time. Basic decisions about, this was the president-elect of the United States, the
yeah,
most consequential human on the planet at the moment.
yeah,
And I had to sort of question myself, well, is it, should I actually publish a bunch of letters from readers about him? And the journalist in me says, of course, there's no question.
yeah,
But one person's opinion mattered more than anyone else, and it was the guy who bought the paper. So
yeah,
that was just it was an instructive experience.
yeah,
It
for
was
sure.
a very dark era for, I think, journalism just in general. And it might still be going on. I mean, it was not just the LA Times. As we know, the Washington Post went through its same um, thing. They still have an editorial board, but gosh, I don't know that I don't know that they benefit at all from having an editorial board. LA Times doesn't. And what's the worst thing about this is that,
Right. The LA Times does not have an
it has no functioning editorial board. The last editorial that was written was by Carla Hall, who's the last remaining editorial writer. She left in March, and there hasn't been an editorial since. There was no endorsement in the Proposition 50. I can't see there being one um anytime soon. And we're going into an election season, and that was the single most important thing that editorial boards did, is to make recommendations in elections, local elections. I mean, presidential endorsements aside, I actually happen to believe that they're not important in terms of um, changing people's minds. Not in these polarized times. It was more about a statement of values about what you as a board, um, the principles you embody. But the local endorsements are so
huge.
important. I can't
Right.
tell you, I mean, when we did judges, when we did the LA city council races, yes, but also the college district boards. Nobody knows who those people are. And
Yeah.
we spent hours and hours and hours
Yeah.
meeting with them, doing reporting, like talking to people like, are these people nuts? Really just doing the legwork for readers. And they
Yeah.
trusted us. I mean, I am 100% sure that everybody I know looked at the judges' endorsements, which were done by our excellent Pulitzer Prize winning former colleague, Rob Green, or at least he headed them up. We all helped him. At least it sat in the meetings. And
It's a tough job.
but
Tough job.
people followed that because they respected him, because they knew that he was applying journalistic criteria and he was doing the legwork. That's going to be gone.
Yeah.
Good thing is we're a nonprofit, so we can't do the same endorsement thing, but we can certainly do the legwork,
Mhm.
the same legwork that we did as editorial board. And we tend to do the same kind of uh, interviews, only this time it'll be for the world to see, because I think people would like to hear. We're about transparency, not like, you don't know why we're saying what we're saying. And so this is just a really important time for anybody to be without that kind of editorial board. And I don't know, a lot of places have lost their editorial board. So if there's one person or, two people, and you can't effectively evaluate local races. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to figure out how to do, not just us, but local journalists and folks, to talk about, important elections, because, yeah, everyone's going to pay attention to the Zohar Mamdani kind of types of elections, or, the governor's race. There's going to be, people will have no shortage of information. But they're like, who knows who their state legislator is?
Right.
So that's where the real work, and those people are important.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've written and edited a lot of endorsements over the years, and they're always some of the most fraught things you can do at a newspaper. Um, they're every, or most of the, sort of really difficult situations I've encountered on editorial boards have involved them. And at the same time, readers really appreciate them. If there's one thing that draws in a whole bunch of subscriptions for a newspaper, it's the endorsements, because there's so few sources of informed opinion and reporting and analysis, especially as you get down to these, judicial races, state legislative races. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah,
Our endorsements were regularly
Mhm.
the top converters. We used to be clicks that newspapers cared about, readership, and then they cared about stories that converted people into subscribers. And in election years, endorsements were one of the overall top converters for the LA Times. So that's lost. That's gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the newsletter I would write, which I get, they let me write my own opinion and then sum up the other opinions. The editorial endorsement roundup was always the biggest subscriber draw. I would get, praise from analytics people at the paper, and I'm just trumpeting the editorial board's work here.
Right.
It was, from a business standpoint, it does not make much sense to muzzle something that was so useful, so useful.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that, opinion can be challenging in the context of nonprofits too, in a way. I mean, sometimes there is, it brings its own challenges. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to go with a nonprofit model, and how you feel about the freedom to do opinion in that context, versus the context we all experience?
Boy, that was a tough decision. We went back and forth. That was my initial thought, and then then we were thinking, nah, let's just do it a for-profit model. I mean, it's not like we're going to make huge amounts of money, but we have all the freedom. We don't have to have a board. We don't have to have, yeah. I mean, there's endless. I can't even tell you the endless forms and the hoops you have to jump through and the craziness. But it turns out the rules aren't as restrictive. I mean, once you get through all the paperwork, the benefits outweigh the negatives. There are rules, this is the guess the Jackson Doctrine, that prohibit direct candidate endorsements. Although, interestingly, during the 2020 elections, a lot of nonprofit news organizations endorsed anyway. In fact, it's the basis for the argument in this before the Supreme Court from the not conservative, the Christian Broadcast Association. That anyway, blah blah blah. But that's one of their main points. So that's interesting. But we still don't plan to do it in editorial board endorsement
Yeah.
that same way. We can't advocate, we can't do the kind of lobbying that PACs can do. We don't want to do that kind of stuff. We want to be informative to people. And we call ourselves a news and commentary site because we're not just like an old opinion section. We are doing interviews that are newsmaker interviews. We have all sorts of different contexts, some that are just analytical, some that are pure, you know, uh, essays. But anyway, so I got far away from your question.
We've done a lot of reporting.
Decided to do that.
Yeah.
But Paul was really a big, he pushed me in that direction.
Right.
Paul, you want to talk about why?
Yeah, I just felt like we can talk about transparency, and as a business, as a for-profit organization, it's largely up to you to how transparent you're being. With the nonprofit, I think it just felt like the right thing to do. It was a way to burnish the fact that this is really a public service. We don't see ourselves as extracting wealth out of this. We see this as something that contributes to community building, community well-being, and having experienced journalists put big issues into context. I don't think you can make an argument that that is not a public benefit. So I had been, you know, when Mariel says that this was a decision that we really wrestled with, I mean, we would call each other. One day we thought this, the next day we thought that, one day we thought this. It was really the first decision that took a long time to make. But it really felt like the right thing to do. I had just come from a place that, well, it's technically for profit. They're not making profit, but it's owned by a billionaire.
Technically.
And it felt much better, rather than to say, trust us, we're transparent, to say, look, the law requires a certain level of transparency from us.
Mm-hmm.
That felt like the right thing to do.
Right. And by the way, a lot of for-profit news organizations have bowed out of endorsements entirely as well. Just I think including the LA Times, because of I think they'd rather avoid it entirely.
I mean, that's kind of the problem. That's
right.
One of the fundamental problems with your traditional newspapers is they're afraid of offending anybody. And if you're not offending anybody, you're not doing your job, which is to sort of, highlight the truth, the facts,
right.
And to stand on your principles.
Yeah, and to especially offend people who have power. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Exactly.
You don't want to make them feel comfortable. You want to make them feel like you're going to call them out on their stuff because you have your own set of principles as a journalist that can't be encroached upon by someone who dangles money over you.
One of the basic things that I learned in college about journalism, which really attracted to me, we're all idealists when we're in college, was the basic tenet that our job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Yeah.
And a lot of journalism is not doing that. It's appeasing the comfortable, so as not to get canceled or shut down or, harassed, or killed. I mean, those are the stakes these days.
Yeah. And I think opinion journalism is a really great way to offend powerful people. And it's why it ends up, being in the crosshairs first a lot of the time.
And it's not just in LA. I just want to say, and there's at the San Diego paper, they one of their opinion editors, who was an editorial board member, was laid off after she had prepared an editorial talking about the immigration raids. And Mariel, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's a Southern California News Group paper in San Diego. And so now, for pretty much all of Southern California, there, maybe aside from some really local community papers, I think there's one editorial board that
There's a overarching editorial board. I don't think the San Diego Union is part of that, but for all the other papers, Orange County Register, Press Enterprise, paper I used to work at, LA Daily News, another paper I used to work at. In fact, I used to run the opinion section for the precursor to the Southern California News Group, which was the Los Angeles News Group. And we had a staff of 7 for 9 papers. They have a staff of 2 for 11 papers. And it's like two guys, and they're working their butts off. They have outside people writing editorials and on their editorial board, but it's like that's it. And they can't possibly do the type of in-depth endorsements or work that you need to do when it comes to elections. So,
yeah, I'm worried they can't even. I don't mean to imply that they're doing this, but having done a job that requires thousands of words of reading every day, my letters editing job, I think if I were editing letters for 13 different papers or however many it is, I would be worried that some of the things might not be able to get fact checked. Little things like that
Sure.
from having been inside, to see the decimation of opinion journalism staffs in California and elsewhere. It's really concerning. So
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case.
but part of that is, I think that the separation between what we call opinion and what we call news, I mean, it's been breaking down. I don't know if it was ever real. It was a marketing tactic. And I think it's what people want is contextual journalism. And
Mhm.
that is what we can provide.
Mhm.
Analysis. Yes, there's an important place for this happened, this happened, this happened. But the model of, here's a news thing, here's what one person said, here's what another person said, and here's a little bit of history and more details. That doesn't work for a lot of people. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand the context, what this means, like who's supporting it. I mean, so I think that's another sort of issue that we're grappling with as well. When we went nonprofit and we were looking at, joining different nonprofit in groups, and I found that there's a lot of organizations that call themselves news, which are really just all sort of point of view, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that's the space that we live in. But like for the free press, for example, the Barry Weiss founded, very popular. But I mean, it was not like, hey, today there was a car crash. That's not that. It was all sort of contextual, point of view, spin on what the big stories of the day are. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the world we live in, and that's what people want. I think that's what they need. There's so much noise out there.
Yeah.
There's so much BS in the social media space, and we're trying to cut through that.
Yeah, that old news and opinion model certainly was rooted in business considerations, and it is looking kind of older than ever, I think. Did you two want to? I think, we obviously have a big election coming up in California. I know both of you were maybe a little more ambivalent about Prop 50 than I was, but I've been radicalized, I'll admit it. But what's done is done. And now we've got this Hunger Games situation where the Republicans are scrambling for half the seats they used to have, most likely. And we also have a governor's race, of course, to succeed Gavin Newsom next year. Do you have any thoughts on that? You want to share what you're looking to cover going forward on the election?
Boy, that's like a whole other hour.
Okay.
No, yeah, very, very, yeah. There's a lot of exciting stuff. I think the 5 or 6 congressional races that could be flipped are going to be really interesting to cover. The governor's race, I don't know who. A lot of people thought Alex Padilla was going to get in, and he would have been a shoe in. And I'm a little surprised he didn't, but I'm sure he's got his reasons. Now we see who emerges. I still like Katie Porter, despite the video. And by the way, Josh, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That behind closed doors, I, I have seen so much bad behavior from
Yes.
people, including some of those who are like, "Oh, Katie Porter." I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
seriously. So I just found it rich that
Yeah.
there were a lot of pearl clutching comments, and it was
Yeah.
great. No, I hate it when candidates are shitty to reporters, because they do it all the time.
They do. And
to editors as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to give you a chance just to tell everyone, where they can find you, how they can help, what you're hoping for from, your first couple weeks of after the launch.
Well, we want to consistently publish, of course. We have quite a few pieces in the work. We are doing a fundraising campaign, and that, of course, is a marathon. I mean, like Mariel said, this is not something that I was ever trained to do. To say, can you help us, please? But I am kind of floored by people's willingness to help. So there's going to be a lot of that. We're going to determine our priorities for coverage going forward. Like Mariel said, there's a big election, a very important election coming up. Also happening in the city of Los Angeles. Some interesting elections going on here. Is this an odd year, Mariel, for council seats?
It's always odd. Or no, what do you? No,
Even or odd?
They're an odd crew. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Odd. It's.
I think
Odd.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an odd year.
Okay.
It's
I'm
an
not
odd
even
year,
sure what
and
that
it's an
means.
odd.
It's districts 1, 3, 5.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
There's an interesting trend,
Wow.
and that is the progressive / democratic socialist movement in Los Angeles, really empowered by the Mamdani win, as you might expect,
I
in
saw.
in New York. And they have two candidates in 2 different council races. If they win it, their 4 goes to 6, which is still not a majority on the council, but it's a serious block of power. So you might see some growth in power that way. It's really hard to know in LA. LA swings back and forth between progressive and not progressive. So I just don't know how it's going to go. So it's going to be interesting, though.
Right.
I'm interested to see what happens with the gondola to Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
That's not up for a vote.
Another big LA issue for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can also just quickly talk about like the scope, because people have asked us before. Is Golden State a California publication or is it an LA publication? And the answer is to both. Yes, to both.
Mhm.
We are focused on California, but we're rooted in LA, which means we see the state, we see the country, we see the world through a California lens. Kind of like, I like to use the example of the Atlantic. It was like the Atlantic is a big sort of geographic area, but they say it through a very specific prism, DC sort of world. And
Right.
that's where we are. We think this Southern California region is really important, and that is the lens through which we see and filter everything.
Right. The Pacific. Yeah, well, I'm really excited for both of you. I'm excited about the site, and it's golden-state.org. And I encourage everyone to check it out. And I really appreciate both of you joining me. It's great to see you.
It's nice to see you too.
Get the band back together.
And thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah.
It looks like my mom. Hi, Mom.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And I'll talk to both of you soon, I hope.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.